Today, I'm going to be speaking with Dan Kovalik, who is a labor and human rights attorney and also author of the book Cancel This Book, The Progressive Case Against Cancel Culture. It's great to have you on, Dan.
Yeah, it's great to be here, David. Thank you.
So the reason I'm interested in this is there are certainly a range of views across the political spectrum about this issue of so-called cancel culture and what counts as cancel culture and what doesn't. But even within the left, there is some disagreement as to whether it's taking place, what counts, what should be done. Maybe start by kind of giving us your sense of relative to the idea that we hear on right-wing media about this as a sort of speech suppression, politically based epidemic that is taking place in media and academia and across the social and cultural areas. How does your position compare to that as a starting point?
Yes, compared to the right-wing position, I think mine is certainly different. First of all, I'm not hysterical about it. I mean, I try to deal with it in a reasoned way. I certainly am concerned about it. I'll just give examples. Like, I'm not concerned about the fact that Pepe Le Pew's not going to be in the next this movie.
Yeah.
That was decided by the producers, and I certainly think that he is a problematic character who basically his only thing he ever did was assault the other skunk. The same thing with the Dr. Seuss issue. I mean, the estate itself, apparently, of Dr. Seuss decided to get rid of these 6 books, which no one ever heard of, and which, were offensive. And I think Dr. Seuss progressed in his thoughts as he got older.
Right.
And that actually is a good segue into what I am concerned about. What would concern me is if all of Dr. Seuss's books were canceled because of his earlier works.
Okay.
The concern I have about cancel culture, particularly on the left, is that it seems to me there's a lack of forgiveness and chance for redemption for people. You make one mistake, and I've seen this, all of us have seen this many times, and that's why people who deny that cancel culture exists, I just think are not being honest. We see many times someone will do something that is offensive or barely offensive or seen by someone as offensive, and they're immediately shut out. People call for them to be fired. Sometimes they'll get fired. That concerns me.
So let's break down that process so that we can maybe even figure out which is the part that concerns you. Because so let's imagine a situation where someone tweets something that we agree is offensive, not related to their work while they are on the weekend. Or, there was this story that John Ronson talks about in his book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, a woman who tweeted something about white versus black people getting AIDS as she stepped onto a flight. And then when she landed, it had exploded into an international story and photographers were waiting for her and whatever. Okay, so the thing is said, then there is a public outcry from people who say, this is bad. Sometimes you'll see the public contact the employer of the individual and ask for them to be fired, even if what was said does arguably not directly relate to the person's job. The employer will then sometimes put out a statement. Sometimes they'll say, we are disciplining the person. Sometimes they will fire the person. Now, at every individual level, people tweeting outrage seems to be something that I don't have a problem with people tweeting outrage. People demanding that the person be fired is a question mark for me. And this has been done to me before, in fact, as well, in the sense that certainly calling a business, if you find out the person works somewhere and you're going to say, if this person works for you, I'm not going to be a patron of your business. Certainly something I can't say is wrong to do, although I might disagree with it. And then the firing decision, an employer can decide, as long as they're not discriminating on the basis of protected class, it's no longer good for our business to have this person working for us. So like the pieces all, when you break them down the way I'm doing it, aren't particularly concerning. So, like, which aspect is it you are most worried about?
Well, first of all, I mean, the context is everything. And I mean, it's one thing if you find out someone is an avowed white supremacist who
Okay.
at night dresses up in a hood and is part of the Ku Klux Klan.
Hmm.
This is a person with bad motives, bad intentions. I think how you deal with that person would be different than someone who is otherwise well intentioned, who says something inadvertently
Sure.
offensive or does something inadvertently offensive. I think they need to be treated differently. I don't think you should pile on someone, even on social media, who makes a mistake and who says, "Look, I'm sorry."
Right.
And that happens a lot, right? And usually, even after the "I'm sorry," it doesn't end, right? And I certainly don't think you should try to get someone like that fired, except in the most egregious circumstance. I don't see getting someone fired in most circumstances some act of social activism. I see it as something counter to solidarity with your fellow workers, with your fellow comrades, many times. And this concerns me greatly, especially in the academy now. And I talk about this in my book. I think a lot of people don't understand that the academy has gone through a huge transformation in recent decades from tenured professors, on the most part, to now adjunct professors. Most professors now are adjunct. What does that mean? It means they don't have tenure, they have
Right.
no job security, they get paid poverty wages. I'm an adjunct, for example. I get
Yeah.
$3,000 per class I teach at the law school. I may teach 50 students that pay 40 grand a year to attend it, right? And I get 3 grand for the whole class and can be fired mid semester. I have not, I'm, basically a glorified, gig worker in
Right.
truth.
Right. Yeah. And I've taught adjunct as well at Boston College and have had a similar experience.
And to call lightly, and I think many times it's lightly, for someone like that to be fired is kicking down. It's not punching up. It's not fighting. You're not taking on the man. In fact,
I
what
agree
you're
with you.
doing is uniting with the man, right? The administrators who make a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not over a million, against these lowly adjuncts. And you see this a lot. Um,
Yeah, a
it,
woman
it-
named
you know,
Amy Siskind, a Democratic activist, tried to get me fired from Boston College because I responded to a tweet of hers saying that the 2020 nominee, or maybe it was even 2016, 2020, shouldn't be white or a man. And I said, that seems to me to be wrong, to disqualify someone on the basis of sex or race. And she tried to get me fired from Boston College, and that's wrong. But what I'm hearing from you is more that you just think sometimes these tools are wielded when they shouldn't be. Like, there's more egregious and less egregious cases. And sometimes you just think the action doesn't rise to warranting a call to be fired, for example.
I think it would be a rare case where that would be legitimate. Let me put it that way. But I do think, there's something that people now refer to the Overton window.
Yes.
You've probably heard that there is a line. There are lines of demarcation. Again, I think if someone is an avowed racist, an avowed white supremacist, um, particularly in a sensitive position of power, I think it's legitimate to call that person out publicly and with their employer.
But who gets to decide what rises to what level and if the position is sensitive?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think obviously it's up to the individual who's doing the attempted canceling, if we want to say that,
Okay.
has to use some judgment. But I think giving what I'm illustrating is that you would do this very rarely. There's, you know, not that many. There are obviously avowed white supremacists, but most of the people we come in contact with on a daily basis are not that, and most of the people that are being canceled are not that. In fact, the irony is, to calling someone a racist or a sexist is only damaging to people who don't want to be racist or sexist, right? I mean, if you're an avowed racist, that's a compliment, I guess.
So what would be an example of someone who was called a racist and then fired, but what they said was just a lapse in judgment and really they shouldn't have been?
Okay, well, I'll give an example from my book and why I wrote the book, because of something that happened in Pittsburgh. And
Okay.
and this was not someone who was fired, but in a way it was even greater than being fired. So in Pittsburgh, we have this peace and justice group called the Thomas Merton Center, and it was founded 50 years ago, co-founded by someone named Molly Rush, a longtime peace activist, and also someone who's advocated for economic and racial justice. During the George Floyd protest of last summer, she posted on Facebook, reposted, like someone had posted it, and she just hit share, which many of us do,
Yep.
without thinking. She posted this meme with a picture of Martin Luther King, and it said, "Never rioted, never looted, change the world."
Mm-hmm.
Immediately, people started jumping on her on Facebook, attacking her as a racist, attacking her family who defended her, calling them white trash. She apologized on Facebook publicly, but that wasn't enough. What ended up happening is the Thomas Merton Center, the board of the Thomas Merton Center, put out a letter both to all Thomas Merton Center members and publicly on Facebook, saying they could no longer work with Molly Rush
Yeah.
after 50 years. And this is, so the argument was this meme was racist because you shouldn't tell African Americans how to fight for their liberation, right? If there's some violence that ensues, it's not for us to say. And of course, though, as I point out in my book, if you look at a lot of the violence that happened, a lot of it, probably the vast majority, was not done by African Americans. It was done either by young white anarchists, usually young white males, or young white male right-wingers trying to either inflame the situation or to delegitimize Black Lives Matter. So
Mm-hmm.
Calling those people out, why is that problematic? In fact, in Portland, as I mentioned, there were newspaper articles that quoted people from Black Lives Matter and from the NAACP saying that the violence that took place night after night in Portland at around midnight and later had nothing to do with Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
something else. This was, again, young white people who were anarchists or whatever they were, who decided they wanted to do what they wanted to do, which was attack the federal courthouse night after night.
I think this is a great example. I mean, listen, if this example is as you describe it, and I have no reason to doubt it, I'm just saying what I know about it is what you're telling me.
Exactly.
This would be one where I agree. This sounds like the wrong solution. But I guess where I worry is that in a country of 331 million people, there's examples of everything. Every good company that's a big company is going to have 100 or 1,000 customer experiences that sound terrible, but they represent very little in the scope of how the company deals with customers, as an example. I worry that this is being called an epidemic when I will grant that in a country of 331 million, the example just you gave me sounds terrible. It sounds completely counterproductive to the goals of me as a person on the left, for example. And I'm with you if the details are as described. I just don't see the epidemic. And individually, it sounds like you certainly defend the right of people to express their distaste on social media, right? Like you and I are on the same page there.
Yes, absolutely.
And you certainly defend the right of individuals to tell a company, I won't do business with you because of this. Whether they're right or wrong, you defend the right that they have to do that.
Well, certainly consumers have that right. They certainly have that legal right. They should.
Yeah.
Now, again, as a matter of discretion,
Sure.
or a matter of conscience, whether they should do it, that's another question. But
Right.
obviously, people have the legal right to do that.
And then businesses as businesses that exist, some are regulated in certain ways and some are others. As long as they're not breaking any laws, they can also decide having a certain employee is bad for us and it could hurt profits or whatever. We don't want this employee working for us. That you agree with?
Yes, of course.
So it sounds like really it's the sometimes overbearing activation of these tactics that you're concerned about.
Well, yes. And again, I never use the word epidemic in my book or when I talk about this,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't use that. But I do think it is, I think it is a frequently used tactic against people, particularly in the academy. The academy is really soaked in this stuff. Again, just to give a couple examples off the bat, there was this woman last summer, again, during the height of the George Floyd protest, a professor who apparently, or some people thought, fell asleep during a Zoom call in which racial diversity was being talked about. People said she should be fired. You had this couple at Yale who they were residential professors, meaning they lived on campus and were in charge of residential life. During Halloween, they refused to give any guidance or rules as to what kind of costumes people could wear. And people thought, well, that's insensitive. You should tell people not to wear
certain costumes,
racist or whatever costumes, when in fact the professors were just like, we trust that you're going to make the right decision. And people, clamored for them to be kicked off campus because their decision making was being respected. I mean, these are
now. Did that work? Were they kicked off campus?
I don't know the answer to that.
Because I think that another aspect to this, Dan, is there's no doubt that the general population is of course going. I mean, listen, look at what's going on with COVID guidelines. What's the reason that the CDC and others have to be so careful in what they say? That tons of people will misunderstand deliberately or not, and they'll do the wrong thing. I think that one of the things that's important is, in many of the cases where there is a clamoring where maybe you and I wouldn't agree that someone should be fired or canceled, the systems are robust enough that the cancellation doesn't happen. And that's why I asked about these folks being kicked off campus, because if they weren't, then sure, we can say, hey, you know what? The clamoring for them to be kicked off campus was wrong, but they weren't kicked off, meaning that the system worked.
Yeah, well, although I think there's a lot of cases where that's not true. That
Okay.
where people were kicked off.
Yeah.
Or their classes at least suspended. There was a case, all of his classes were suspended because I believe it was a Japanese word that he was using, nige, which means kind of or it's a transitional phrase. And people thought it sounded too much like the N word, complained. And he lost his classes. Okay, this is, again, there's a lot of cases like this.
Again, if that's true, that's nuts. But I think it's important, like when we say a lot,
right,
we're usually talking about, a few anecdotes. Like if someone came to me and said, in a country of 331 million, 5,000 teachers were fired because they did I think it's important to keep that context.
Right. And again, I don't want to jump on the bandwagon that this is a national crisis, okay? Because I don't think it is.
But the message of tread carefully is a good one.
Yes, and by the way, as I mentioned in one chapter near the end of the book, there are a lot of, who's really being persecuted are people who advocate on behalf of Palestinians. They are often deplatformed, fired, not hired, because people say they're anti-Semitic, because they advocate for Palestinian rights. Even Bishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa, who won a Nobel Prize, was uninvited to speak because they said his position that Israel was also an apartheid state was somehow racist. So, and there's been scores of cases like that. So, but you're right. But I will if I can give one example, because I know that our time's running out, where this is becoming more systematic. The Trump administration actually seized on this at the National Labor Relations Board. His NLRB was the most right-wing anti-union board we've ever had.
Right.
And I can say that because I was a labor lawyer for 26 years. so I know of what I speak. And they issued a decision in the case of General Motors at the end of 2019, which overturned years of board law and made it easier to fire employees engaged in union activity for offensive speech.
Mm.
It used to be much harder to do that. The idea was, if I'm involved in a strike or in collective bargaining, I may say, you talking to you as the manager, you bastard, you're screwing us. And the board was very reluctant to fire someone like that. It was seen as protected.
You'd
Okay.
be relatively insulated from repercussions for that.
Right. Even if there was a racial or sexist tinge to what you were saying, as long as you weren't threatening violence. Okay. The Trump board overturned all that law and basically said, look, if the employer finds your speech offensive and we're not going to look at whether it's objectively offensive as we used to, they can fire you. And in this case, in the General Motors case, it was an African-American employee who was fired, in part because during negotiations, he pretended to be a slave, saying, oh, yes, massa, this sort of thing, in arguing with the employer. And the board upheld his discipline. Okay. So and it's not because the Trump administration was woke in terms of racial justice,
right,
or because economic. They seized on this mood to crack down on workers' rights. And I think that we have to see that is a huge potential when you have people being, willy-nilly called to be fired for these sorts of things. Because most people in this economy have no rights.
Yes.
They don't have unions to protect them. They don't have a just cause provision. They don't have tenure. They can be fired like that and will be. And I think there has to be, on the part of leftists and liberals who consider themselves activists and people of conscience, they need to be very reluctant to take away people's jobs.
I think that there's no question about that. And there's sort of different categories here as well. I mean, the calls for firings seem to me to be a very different thing than like the Washington Redskins deciding that, hey, Redskins and this picture of a red guy are completely out of touch with the way people relate to each other right now, and that should go. And I think where the right sometimes goes off the deep end on this is they bunch it all together and they do a sort of gish gallop and they say, look at all this stuff. Whereas what makes sense to do, which is what I think you're trying to do, is to look specifically at instances where the tactic is not calibrated to the substance.
Yes. I think we have to have a reasonable discussion about that. And I think we have to let people make mistakes. Again, if they're well-intentioned, educate them. But the first move should not be to punish. I don't think that is the type of movement we should be seeking.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw this, but I don't follow the story super closely, but I think it was a Miami Heat player who a couple of weeks ago during some online game used the K word about Jews and things exploded. And Julian Edelman, the NFL football player who's half Jewish or considers himself Jewish now, reached out and said, I'm not going to assume you said what you said because you know exactly what it means and its history and whatever. Let's get together and talk about it. And a lot of people liked that. But at the same time, as an organization, the Miami Heat decided we have to do something about it so it's clear that we aren't standing by it. And I think also the responses that are the right ones may be different depending on who's responding, as evidenced in this case.
Yes, and I agree. And your example is interesting because it just shows how things have changed with technology. I mean, now virtually everything we say and do is captured somewhere.
Right.
On an iPhone, on a computer, in a video game, as you say. And again, I certainly think people shouldn't be throwing around racial epithets. at the same time, again, to jump on people for things that they say in the heat of the moment on a video game or something, again, I'm just reluctant to do that. And I think
Yeah, I
that,
think
yeah,
heat of the moment, with all there's a double edge to all of these. I mean, heat of the moment, remember the Mel Gibson thing where with the a cop that happened to be Jewish and the whole thing about are you a Jew or whatever, and then said, well, I was drunk. No matter how drunk I am, Dan, I'm not going to accidentally say anti-Semitic things. So the idea of heat of
right.
the moment and inebriate, it's like it came from. So I think that all of these things have to be balanced, I think is the message.
Well, I think that's right. I think that's right. And I think at least to approach these things with your first goal being understanding
Yeah.
and forgiveness and a chance for redemption, I think is the way to go. That's my main message.
That seems completely plausible to me. The book is fascinating. It's called Cancel This Book, The Progressive Case Against Cancel Culture. We've been speaking with the book's author, Daniel Kovalik, and I really appreciate your time today, Dan.
David, it was wonderful. I'd love to come back.